Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll do another video here, again based on your suggestions. This one was actually suggested the last go around. This was involving some of the craziest and kookiest things. I never really got around to it, but I wanted to go ahead and save it for another entry. And in this case, let's go ahead and we'll talk about it here. What's unique about this urban legend is that for a while, it was actually considered that just an urban legend, but through the passage of time and especially the explosion of the internet and especially involving videos and sharing of videos, this urban legend eventually became true because more people saw it. In fact, I'll report that there's a huge number of people that have seen this now, but back then when it first came out, there was obviously just no internet around. There was nothing involving video sharing, so this remained sort of an urban legend status, so quite unique with that regards. And what I'm talking about is the urban legend known as the exploding whale. So quite a fun one here because there's a lot of kooky information to share. It's just one of those things where you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is where truth is stranger than fiction. That perfectly sums up essentially this tale. So what it is this. You have to go back a couple of decades, not too far back, but 1970 to be exact, November 12th. That's when in Oregon, a place called Florence, Oregon, a sperm whale was found beached right along the coast itself. And anyone that knows anything involving whales, they have this strange I don't know if it's a life cycle of sorts, but they do this, and to this day it still remains a mystery of some sort, unless someone has a definitive answer and would like to provide it here. But for some reason, whales beach themselves. They essentially commit suicide, and when that happens, their carcass, or at least their body itself, somewhat remains on the beach. And this is actually a dangerous thing because what would happen is if it's left alone as is, there's a very strong chance that the whale will explode on its own. Now, not in the sense like, let's say that it's going to explode movie style, where there's a whole bunch of, let's say, debris flying everywhere, but no, more commonly it'll just blow part of itself up. Just like let's say if you're popping a small pressure balloon, then one side of the balloon will spew everything out towards its side, and that's what would happen here. And the reason for it is because whenever you're dealing with a decomposing body, or in this case a decomposing animal carcass, there's a lot of gas that builds up from the bacteria, and when that happens, the gas has to go somewhere, and unless there's an opening of some sort for it to do so, it'll just build up and build up until it actually explodes, at least on one side. And so it's not necessarily 100% dangerous, but at the same time it's a nuisance, and so it has to be taken care of. Lots of places around the world have already dealt with exploding whales, or at least potentially exploding whales, those that again are found beached alongside coast. And the most common way is they actually drag the whale out back into the sea. The people that take care of this usually place it on some kind of ferry or some kind of boat, and then just literally take it out into the sea and either leave it as is or they explode it themselves, safe and harmless. In other words, there's nothing that could happen because it's far out at sea. Well, again, something involving truth stranger than fiction. Here, this takes on a very strange set of circumstances. So here's what happened. Once this beached whale was discovered, then technically under that area that the beach whale was found, it falls under the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. However, during that time period in 1970, anything involving the beaches themselves were actually taken care of by the Oregon Department of Transportation. So no less than the actual department that, let's say, deals with highways, that deals with bridges, that deals with filling potholes or tearing down let's say other streets and replacing them with new ones. That very same department had the jurisdiction of taking care of this beached whale. Obviously that's two completely separate things in terms of what these guys normally do. So why they were ultimately giving this decision as opposed to, let's say, more experienced people, that's where it remains one of those things where you scratch your head and wonder how it happened. But it did happen. They went ahead and they got the assignment just by default, and so they wanted to take care of it all together. And how they did this was they were thinking several ways. One is they could try to bury the whale, but that wouldn't work because eventually either the tide would uncover it or just people themselves would uncover it altogether to try to get a best look at the whale. So that was not a good idea. And then finally it was decided, you know what, let's go ahead and let's blow up the whale. Now again, this has been done in the past and it still continues to this day, but it's always done out towards the sea. But in this case, it was decided to blow up the whale right there on that beach. So that's mistake number one. And then mistake number two is that it was decided that there was going to be a whole lot of dynamite used to blow up the carcass. And who decided this? It was a guy by the name, and he was placed in charge of the operation by the name of George Thornton, and you're looking at a picture of him here. What's fascinating is that the people that I'm going to showcase, they've actually gone on to live a little bit of like infamous lives, because ever since this urban legend became reality, again through the mention of the internet and the sharing of videos online, then people began reaching out to these people again. This guy like George Thornton, and then the reporter that I'll talk about here in a minute. And so they've gone on to live, let's say, a little bit of infamous lives, even to his death. This guy George Thornton, he's been someone that people look and then they've learned about him, and then they contacted him, and even upon his death, he still had a little bit of infamy to him. So he was the one that was chosen to, let's say, the engineer to be put in charge of this operation. He later stated that he wasn't really, I don't know if he was stating like 100% like he was the best person for it, but his main engineer, I guess his boss of some sort, a guy by the name of Dale Allen, was not available because he was going hunting at that time. So instead, George Thornton, was placed in charge. So what's the first thing that he does? He again decides that once the dynamite is the best option in this case, at least according to them, he then decides, let's go ahead and we'll use not just a little bit of dynamite, but we're going to use 20 cases of dynamite. I tried to see like what was considered a case, at least for this particular instance, and I'm thinking like it's the cartoon series where it's a case is, let's say, that small bundle of dynamites, usually like 6 of them, let's say, bundled and taped together. If someone can point me to something else that gives a more definitive stance on what that is, but please do so. But that's what I'm thinking. But otherwise, a half ton of dynamite, that's right, 1,000 pounds, was used, and it was placed across the carcass. That is a lot of dynamite. One stick of dynamite is a good amount of power, but in this case there was 20 cases of it, all of them littered right across the carcass, ready to blow it to smithereens. At that point there was a guy who happened to be at that beach. He was one that was apparently just there just by happen chance. He was there doing some kind of work, some kind of contract work for his employer, and he was a military veteran who had some specific explosives training. His name was Walter Humenhofer, and when he was looking, and just out of curiosity looking into what was happening, obviously this beach carcass was getting a whole bunch of attention. Word got to him about the amount of dynamite that was being used, and when he was told that 20 cases of dynamite were going to be used just for this sole purpose, he knew that it was far too much dynamite. In fact, he said, you don't need 20 cases, you need 20 sticks of dynamite, and even then, that's pushing it altogether. He told that engineer George Thornton about this, but Thornton, I don't know if he was just egotistical or if he was just someone that, let's say, in his mind he knew he was right, and not necessarily out of ego, but he knew that this was the right thing. He went ahead and he ignored that advice, and he moved forward with the amount of dynamite that was used. This is important too, because in a strange set of coincidences, an irony of sorts, this would affect that engineer, that other guy, the military veteran Walter Humenhofer, in a very comical manner. I'll explain that here in a minute. Now, the other person that has a little bit of infamy with this particular urban legend is this guy, Paul Lindman. He was the reporter. He was the one that was interviewing the situation and interviewing some of the people there as it was happening. So again, just through the fact that so many people have seen and heard about this urban legend between its initial existence up until now, he has gone on actually to kind of like, I don't know, create a sort of cult-like life associated with this event. People to this day still interview him. People still ask him questions related to it. And what you're looking at here, I believe he actually made a book regarding his experience altogether. And coincidentally and perfectly, marketably, he decided to name his book The Exploding Whale and Other Remarkable Stories from the Evening News. So again, it goes to show, as I was saying earlier, it all has to do with a cult-like status and infamy associated with the characters involved in this particular incidents. So let's go back to the final time whenever the dynamite was being used. So the 20 cases of dynamite were placed right underneath the carcass. Everyone moved back. Of course, the camera was there because the scene, the way it was being filmed, it was done by a news organization from Paul Newman. The news organization he was working for was KATU TV there in Portland, Oregon. And what had happened was they were there. They were filming it. They did the little countdown, and what I've done is I've included a link directly below of the actual video, so when you have a chance, take a look at it. So the countdown went, and then it happened. The countdown reached 0. The dynamite button was pushed, and then lo and behold, the explosion happened. But everyone is surprised at how humongous the explosion was. The video itself shows altogether it is a tremendous explosion. You don't even see the carcass anymore once the explosion happens. For a couple of seconds, everyone is like high-fiving each other, maybe even clinking glasses or bottles of beer in celebration. But very quickly, those seconds die away to almost like shock, because everyone suddenly starts realizing, hey, whatever just exploded is now falling down on us. Because in a strange comical turn, because of the strength of that explosion, not even as far away as they were, those chunks of blubber and intestines and entrails and blood and fat and just everything that's nasty and disgusting with the carcass of the whale actually started landing on those people. From what I read, everyone that was there got sprayed with this stuff. No one was safe. So much so, in fact, that it actually went and stretched into other parts of the place nearby. In fact, it actually went beyond the beach itself. Large pieces of blubber landed in some of the nearby buildings, and in particular some of the parking lots, which were again still quite a distance away from the beach itself. Had some severe damage. There was one parked car in particular, which you're looking at here. This is how serious it was. A large piece of that blubber, which weighs a lot, probably several dozen pounds, if not more than 100 pounds altogether, smashed right on top of that parked car, just completely caving it in, like straight out of the movies. Whenever you see, let's say, something being thrown off of a building and then it lands on a parked car, very, very same thing here. And then whose car was it? Lo and behold, it was none other than that military veterans, the one I was telling earlier that was saying, you know what, don't use 20 cases of dynamite, that's way too much. You should use at least 20 sticks. Here's the guy that had warned everyone about how much damage this could have. He was the one that had, presumably, and what looks like it, the most damage of all with regards to his parked car. How crazy is that? Proof goes to show that, again, this is all stranger than fiction. The idea that something like this specifically not only sprayed everybody, but pinpointed the most damage straight to him. And then on top of that, what was expected was the idea that once this carcass was blown, then the birds that were lining the Oregon beach would take care of it afterward. They would just go ahead and, let's say, start picking up and eating all the carcasses, let nature take care of itself, in other words, and then probably within a day or two, that's it, no more carcass. But no, unfortunately, the the huge explosion, the amount of pressure that it caused, it scared all those birds away, and they did not appear back afterwards. They probably came back, let's say, a couple days later, but otherwise they were scared out of their minds, and so they were not going to go anywhere near where this explosion was. And then on top of that, the carcass itself was not completely blown up. In fact, about half of it was still there, right on the beach itself. So the way that the explosion was done, not only was it too much force, but apparently it wasn't, the dynamite sticks weren't placed in proper locations, because still there was a good chunk of it right then and there. And so eventually the people of the Department of Transportation there decided to take care of it. I think what they eventually did is they buried it, if I'm not mistaken, or they did something else. I was trying to find out the exact information, but I wasn't able to see it all together because no one else really reported on it. So if someone has that information too, that would be great to hear. Otherwise, though, lesson learned, because later on, 9 years later, very much so in that same area, that same location involving that beach, there was around 41 sperm whales that were found beached as well. And so this time, rather than that department, let's say, blowing things up again, instead what they decided to do is they decided to burn the carcasses altogether, make sure that they could, I guess, be turned almost to ash, and then buried them outright altogether. So lesson learned again with that part. So quite fascinating tale. No, this exploding whale. What led it to have like a renewed interest of sorts was a couple of years or decades later. There was this guy by the name of Dave Barry who wrote for the Miami Herald, and this was in 1990, so again, still a little early when it comes to the days of the internet. But he wrote in his column just a kind of like a throwaway line of sorts. He said, "Here at the Exploding Animal Research Institute, we watch it often, especially at parties." In other words, referring to footage of this exploding whale. And when his viewers read this particular line, they started to ask questions, and they started to call in to try to see if they could get more information. This caught the attention of other people from other media, and then it also caught the attention, no less, of the Oregon State Highway as well, because they were thinking that there's a new, let's say, beached whale that has to be taken care of. And then it also caught the attention of other major entities like Wall Street Journal and others decided to publicize some stuff. And so once that happened, people began asking for the footage. It was shown, and then it grew from there. And remember, I was telling earlier that I was going to say how big this footage is, how many people have seen it. Apparently there was a study done in 2006 that said, I don't know how they calculated it, but they said that this particular video has been viewed no less than 350 million times when you combine the total number of websites that have embedded it. Now, the YouTube video that I have the link for only shows about 4 million, so it's not exactly 300 million altogether. So I don't know where they're getting that other figure as far as 350 million, but at least with regards to that study, that's what they get to. So pretty cool story, huh? This exploding whale, this urban legend. Again, one of those rare situations where for the longest time it just remained hidden in the background, kind of like a whisper of sorts, where people would say that they heard about this, but there wasn't really any proof. And then finally, with regards to the advance of the internet, and then also with others eventually sharing through the proper channels, then people saw that it was 100% true, and they had the proof there. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always then. Take care.